Well guys, it's Wednesday the 22nd of November, and that means only one thing: the Carrot Corner Black Friday sale is going live tomorrow. That's right, we do Black Friday on a Thursday. That's what everyone does these days, right? In fact, it's running for 5 days, so you have 5 whole days to get 25% off site-wide at Carrot Corner. Huge savings on our mammoth cash game course, the Carrot Poker School, grades 1, 2, 3, and E. And also, if you prefer something a little bit smaller, then Cash Injection, our quick fix exploitative course, is also 25% off. Head over to carrotcorner.com after this video to check it out. Today's video is about block betting. This is something I don't think you guys do enough. I often take on students, and one of the first things I do when I have a new private student is I run their hands through my Poker Tracker 4. I look at a bunch of their hands, I run some filters, and a hugely common theme is that they just don't use any block bets at all. So I'm willing to bet that a very large number of you watching this simply don't know how to block bet the turn of the river, and that's going to cost you a ton of money. There are lines where block betting is just by far the best thing that you can do. It's better than check, it's better than betting bigger. You've just got to do it, and I'm going to show you some such spots today. I'm going to show you some footage from a session I recently played, and let's help you get block bets into your game. So to clarify what we mean by block betting, we're talking about betting about 33% of the pot or lower. Some block bets I use are like 10% pot, some are 20% pot. It really depends on my hand's equity and what I'm trying to achieve. So block betting can happen on the turn or the river. Using a small c-bet on the flop or something, I'm not going to use the term block bet for that. So in this hand, we called 4-bet the ace-king, and we're called by the button 3-better here. Flop is 10-8-6. This is obviously like one of the worst boards for our range, like 3 cards in the set making zone here, not connecting with any of our Broadway region. I think you can bet here, you can also check here. We're going to be playing quite a lot of check in this situation, so we do check this time. And the button does check back after a bit of a tank. On this ace turn, the way to think about it is that the SPR is really low. The opponent's range here is going to be kind of mergy, like there's going to be some combos like jacks and queens and nines and things like that in there. There's also going to be like ace 5 and ace queen and ace jack, but this is a situation where you just really don't gain a lot by betting big. 4-bet pots in general on the turn, you want to use a small sizing. The exceptions to this are when you're on a really low texture with 2 flush draws or something like that. This one you probably could size up a little bit just because villain does have some hands like 9s and 7s that have slightly more equity for you to deny or whatever, but I think block betting at this SPR in a 4-bet pot is just the main thing that you want to do. Standard sizing, don't overcook this, don't jam. Humans get sucked into this trap of thinking, man, there's only just over a pot size bet left, so for neatness or tidiness or whatever, I just need to shove and simplify things. They feel really squeamish about betting small at low SPRs sometimes, but this is exactly what you should be doing. This allows your opponent to make the most mistakes. It's the harder problem for them to solve. When you jam here, it's not too much of a difficult thing for them to actually navigate. So definitely recommend block betting in this spot. GTO is going to do this. You should do this too. Yeah, it's good against humans too. One of the cool things about block betting, as I said, is that you can do lots of different sizes of block bet. So this one, we defend big blind against button. Flop goes check, check. With turn probing, exploitatively, if your opponent's quite weak, you can lead out here for a small sizing like half pot or 33% pot or something. As a complete exploit, this opponent does seem to have a reasonable VPIP though, so I just opted to play normally and check the king 8 here. On the 8 of diamonds river, when it's gone check check all the way to the end here, it's pretty unlikely that people are going to be bluffing at a super high frequency here. What's a bit more likely is that they're just going to be showing down combos like 5s and 6s and 7s and deuces and ace king and ace jack and ace 10 and things like that. They're going to have some bluffing range, right? But we actually block some of that with the king of spades here, because one hand they're very likely to check all the way down and then bet on the river would be something like king 5 of spades with no backdoor on the flop or something like that. But the blocker thing's neither here nor there. The main thing that's happening here is that we have a value bet. Make no mistake, guys. Block bets are either value bets or bluffs. We don't just want to block pocket 5s or ace jack here because these hands are too mediocre. That doesn't make any sense. Because the 8 is coming in at sufficient equity against the opponent's range here, that's the thing that gives us enough clout to block bet, and we do expect to be a favourite when called when we go for a really small sizing like quarter pot or 5th pot or whatever this is, somewhere in between those two. Villain doesn't call this time, but yeah, definitely the right way to play the hand. Big fan of blocking here. I think it's much better than checking, but I'd go for like 75 or 80% of my students falling into the trap of just checking here and not even considering block bet. So do consider block bet, especially when you block some of your opponent's bluffing range, like with this king here, and especially when you think it's a passively played node where your opponent's just not going to be doing a lot of betting themselves. Block betting is your friend in these spots. Just in case you guys decide to be a bit naughty and become block bet crazed after watching this video and start block betting every single situation because you saw Pete Clark do it on YouTube, don't block bet here. If it was as simple as, look guys, block betting's cool, you can just do it any fucking time that you want, then I wouldn't even need to make this video. You just block bet every spot. So it's amazing how sometimes when I have a session with a student and I teach a concept and I think I've been really clear about when to do it and when not to do it, but if I don't hammer home some counter examples, what happens is the student gets carried away and starts doing it aimlessly and thinks they've discovered like some new magic bean that's going to grow a magic beanstalk to money, and they start block betting in all kinds of spots. And this is one where block betting would be terrible. So 9-8 here, defending big blind against under the gun. We go for a check here, and under the gun goes for a check. We turn trips, which is nice. I usually use B75 in these kind of spots as my main sizing. I think overbetting here is not ridiculous as well, but when the 9 pairs, the nut advantage is going to be somewhat equal. We probably have a bit more 9x, but you know, this isn't a spot where villain's completely capped, so using 75% pot here is probably the main play in theory. Villain quickly calls, and this would be an absolutely dreadful spot for a block bet. This would be the kind of thing where you just simply don't deserve to play the game. In fact, if you go away from watching this video and start block betting in spots like this, I think you should honestly just hang up your poker boots. Like, you should just do the walk of shame away from your computer. Go downstairs, say to your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend or partner or whatever, or your kids, I don't deserve to play the game. I'm quitting the game forever. I just block bet this spot here. Like, that would be totally unacceptable. So I'm going to show you a situation where you just shouldn't do it. This is a counter example. Do not block bet here. You see me overbet here. And the idea is that villain has a capped condensed range. We have a mammoth hand with tons of equity. We want to play the hand's equity and just put a ton of chips into the pot. In this situation, that's how we're going to maximize. Another thing that's really important to understand is that when you block bet, in GTO there's meant to be some raise frequency going on, like you're meant to get bluff raised, and that actually works in your favor when you have like a kind of bad hand. When you just have like a thinnish value hand, it's nice not to get raised. So the fact that humans don't really do that enough is great for you when you have like the pair of 8s from the previous hand. But when you have trips, that works against you because you need people to be raising you at some frequency here when you block, for block to even be viable at all, and they're not going to value raise thin enough, and they're not going to bluff raise enough. So blocking this river would be such a disaster that I want to like grab a bucket and just vomit right now just thinking about it. I literally want to be sick all over my desk at the thought of block betting this river. Don't go off and block bet just for the sheer hell of it. Use your brains. I'm showing you a pattern today. You want to block bet for value when you've got thin value, when you've got low-ish equity, but enough to still be a favorite when called for the sizing that you pick. And you want to block bet bluff sometimes as well, but you want to do that theoretically sparingly, right? Because most of your range needs to be value when you're block betting. But I'm going to show you an example of a block bet bluff later. It's definitely a play that you can make as well. But don't block bet the middle of your range just for the hell of it. And definitely don't block bet the nuts just because you've seen this video. When you have the nuts, you generally want to be going bigger. Yes, I know, GTO nerds, there are certain blockers of hands that should block bet even with the nuts. Yes, we know, and no one cares about your GTO wizard sim. Put it away. Real quick, and just while we're on the topic of block betting, let's talk a little bit about how we might deal with our opponents using this line against us. So we open ace 10 of spades here under the gun, and we get called by the big blind. The flop comes 7-7 deuce rainbow. I think you can bet small here. I think you can check here. I really don't care what we do. It's not going to be too important. If my opponent was a really bad player, by the way, this is exactly the kind of spot I love checking in. Because I have the kind of hand that progresses really well on a lot of turn cards and can bluff catch like with its eyes closed. So this is a decent spot to check if you think your opponent's terrible and it's just going to lead indiscriminately with like random jack 10 offsuit combos on the turn. Don't know why I'm taking so damn long to decide what to do here. Yeah, I like check. I think check's fine. So we turn top pair, huge kicker, basically the nuts unless our opponent has a 7 or pocket deuces, or pocket 10s, which is one combination, or 10-7 suited, which is only hearts, one combination. So pretty much the nizzles. Villain thinks for a little bit, and then block bets. And as you can see, when I look at that subconscious processing there, guys, my cursor actually hovers over the call button really briefly there. Did you see that? But I think raise is way better. When villain block bets, their range is going to be extremely weak compared to if they'd bet bigger. So many of the hands that they would have bet big with, such as the 7, are rarely going to pick this size. In reality, humans really hate doing this with a 7. They get greedy. They want to grow the pot. It's a natural human impulse. So when we face this sizing, playing this kind of smallish raise is really cool for like any 10 that we've just hit, basically. That's the main thing that we're raising for value. And it follows from that we would raise some bluffs as well, like the king jacks and queen jacks over cards, 8-9. Things like this at the same time we'd want to be raising. So don't let your opponent away with playing really small pots when you've got a really great hand and they're block betting. they're going to be merged. They're going to have bluff catchers a lot. They're probably not going to bluff the river big after doing this, although it does happen sometimes. There's definitely a school of player that does go for like a block and then an overbet to try and make you fold large amounts of your range. Just snap call a reg that does that. If you see a reg block the turn here and overbet the river, just get that call button pressed. Like, they're going to be over bluffing for the most part, especially if they come from one of these like mass data coaching for profit schemes where the coaches are like, you must always follow this playbook. If you go small, small, big, everyone will fold. And they teach you to play like a chimpanzee, just as aggressive as a chimpanzee. Chimpanzees are really aggressive, like in life. Like, it's kind of horrific. Have you ever heard about like the stuff chimpanzees do to each other? Like tear each other's faces off and eat them and things like that. Like, it's pretty graphic. And that's what we want to do to our opponents in poker. We want to tear their faces off and eat them. And so the way to do that here is definitely just to not let them away with playing this capped mergey range that's probably not going to bluff enough later. Instead, just go for a raise and bomb the river and put money in the pot. That's how you do well at low stakes. Don't let people's block bets tame your aggression. Don't let people's block bets cause you to play a smaller pot than you're comfortable playing with the hand that you've got. Raise for value. Be aggressive. Be a chimpanzee. It's kind of funny, guys, like when you block bet against the reg, sometimes they level themselves and they just fold like absurd amounts of their range, like it's really silly. But when you do it against a weaker player, they tend to just click call a lot, so you can do it a bit thinner against a recreational player like Jovi Boy Finn here, who definitely likes to rep the fact that he's Finnish. But we are going to finish him in this hand. So he bets 3 big blinds on the flop, we go for a call. Turn goes check check and we land on this river. You can see from the timing of our opponent here that they really just don't have a queen. Like, that's just a fact. They do not have a queen. If they do, they're like an outlier. They're like 2% of the pool that's like a sicko and just snap checks a straight when a jack comes in, which is really bizarre and kind of psychopathic, and just most people don't do that. If you ever come across a human that snap checks a queen here, you should never trust that person. Like, don't be their friend and probably don't ever loan them money or like fall asleep around them because they'll probably stab you. So yeah, like that's kind of scary. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that villain has 1 pair most of the time, because even if villain has 2 pair, like they're going to take time to process whether they should bet the turn. They're going to be like, oh, I have king 10. Like, what am I going to do with king 10 here? So when we land on this river, we're doing way better than you would think. We river 2 pair, which is lovely because now we move ahead of pocket aces and ace king. And we even move ahead of like jack 10, 10, 9, jack 9, 10 deuce. You know, people play the old Doyle Brunson, right? You know, RIP. So yeah, lots of stuff that we beat here. You might think, well, if I bet, nothing's going to call me. Yeah, okay. Well, that's sad ethos to live your life by, man. Like, that's really depressing. Of course you're going to get called. You're just not betting small enough. So like, the reason you guys are failing at poker is that you're not being imaginative or creative enough. You're not sitting here thinking, I have a hand that has the majority of the equity in the pot and there are loads of worse hands in villain's range which are made hands. What do I do about that? Well, yeah, if you bomb it, you're just not going to get called by enough. Worse, you're going to get called by king 10 and king 9 and a set and stuff like that sometimes. And it's probably going to be like a really bad play. So betting pot here is really bad. But betting like 3rd pot or 5th pot or something like that is totally fine. So I'm a major fan of this small block bet here. We just go for 5th pot. Villain doesn't think too hard, quickly calls with pocket aces. If you check here, you're leaving money on the table. Value bet then, use block bets. It's especially good against these weaker opponents. That's going to be great. At times your hand looks like it could be a block bet, but when you really think about it and you do the hard work and you sort of get good at poker and you learn range thresholds and equities and stuff like that, we talk about this a lot in the Carrot Poker School, which of course you can get 25% off from tomorrow onwards. If you're watching this after Wednesday the 22nd, Black Friday sale is either going or it's already finished and you're too late. Sorry about that. If you're watching it in January or something, you know, you've got to be fast with these things. We'll do another one next year. So pocket 10s goes check check here. We have called big blind. Of course we could 3-bet. This is not a 3-bet as often as people think it is against under the gun, especially where under the gun is not like a maniac or something. So yeah, turn, you can do a lot of different things. You could probably bet big, you can bet small, you can check. We decide to check this time. And on the river, I think our hand is just too good to block bet here. Block betting is something you do when, well, the equity threshold for it that we teach in the Carrot Poker School, grade 2. We talk about this a bit in grade 1, lecture 2, by the way, but mostly in grade 2, is that to block bet, you normally want about 60 to 73% or something like that, 60 to 70% mainly out of position. And the thing with 10s is here that it probably has like 80% equity on the river. So if it has 80% on the river because people are terrible at checking back flushes, because we block flushes, and because people are terrible at checking back a queen, then we just want to bet bigger. So you can see there that I don't actually go for the block bet on the river in this node. I just go for a bigger bet that's more correlated with my hand's equity. Now, another misconception that people have in poker is they say things like, if I just bet my hand's equity, aren't I playing a face-up transparent strategy? Surely that's not how the good players play. But actually, that is how the good players play. You don't balance value with other value. That's not really a thing. There are certain blocker hands that do want to use anomaly sizes based on what they remove from the deck, but by and large, what you want to do is you want to balance your value bets with bluffs, but tailor your bet sizing to your value hands. That means at a spot like this, we could be building a 33% pot size bet, a 75% pot size bet like we used here, and also an overbet, and also like a 3x pot if we had the nut flush and just slow played up until this point with the flush draw. No harm at all in betting bigger there. No harm in just tailoring your value hand to your hand's equity and then filling up your range with bluffs for each sizing accordingly. The bigger you bet, the more bluff to value ratio you're allowed to have. So don't automatically put all of your bluffs into a block sizing against a good player. You're going to be over bluffing like an absolute maniac if you do that. The reason I chose this topic for today's video was that this is just a spot where loads of block bets came up. Like this session was block bet rich. I was full of them and I was like, man, I just keep getting block bet spots. And also, I've just been teaching a bunch of private students how to actually use this for the first time. It's incredible, like how people haven't picked up on this, that this is such a good thing to do. It's part of No Limit Hold'em. No Limit Hold'em is a game where you can use that bet slider, you can put it to whatever you want, yet people are trapped in this box of like, if I bet 70% of the pot. Like, come on, man. Wake up. Start playing poker. Play No Limit Hold'em. You're not playing Raz. You're not like an old timer playing stud, sitting there at the card room like, stud's a real man's game, son. Like, that's not what you want to be. You want to be a No Limit Hold'em online aficionado, so block bet. All right, check on the turn after we call flop here. Big blind versus hijack. This hand can probably bet bigger. It's another one of these ones that can. The thing is though, when villain has bet the flop, things are a little bit different because they polarize slightly in theory. But I do think that given that people just range bet the flop at these stakes, I think I could have gone bigger here. So looking at this one now, I'm kind of thinking, yeah, well, block bet's okay. It's fine. Like, I don't think it's a mistake in theory. You probably can't do it. But at the same time, with the 10 of diamonds blocker, we may be able to actually go bigger here. Now, I don't think block bet's a mistake or anything like that. I think it's probably all right. And on the flush river, people may overfold to the bigger bet. So I don't mind this at all, but you can go bigger. And another thing I want to say is that just because like it's comforting maybe to just use a few bet sizes to like have 33 in your toolkit and then 75 and then 150. And in the Carrot Poker School, we do deliberately need to restrict the number of different bet sizes we look at so it doesn't become an absolute mess because it's a theoretical course. But in real life, you are allowed to do something else. So if you think that B33 is a little small, but your B75 is a little big, bet half pot. Oh, but I don't bet half pot. That's not one of my... Just bet half pot. Like, what's the problem? Is like the Grim Reaper of Poker going to come to your house and be like, mate, you use the sizing that's not in your regular toolkit? Yeah, you know what needs to happen now? Yeah, all right, out the back, let's go. No, that's not what's going to happen. In reality, nothing bad will happen. So bet whatever sizing you want. Remember that video where I was like throwing all the chips and cards in the air and I was like, you can do whatever the hell you want. And I was like a crazed maniac for that video. You go back and check out if you haven't seen it. It was a couple of weeks ago from when this came out. But yeah, don't feel like you're shackled to like one or two different bet sizes. You can do whatever you want. Bet half pot if you think that's what your value hand is worth. Balance it with bluffs. Sometimes I get into trouble for not showing enough losing hands. Like someone accused me of like being that guy that's like, look, I win every pot because I'm good at poker. And I definitely don't win every pot, guys. Just most of them, like 98% of them. But there are 2% of pots that I lose, and I'm going to show you one of those 2 out of every 100 hands right now. So Queen 10 here. Can't always win with Queen 10 offsuit against hijack. You know, it only has like 36% equity. Check that out, by the way. What is the equity of Queen 10 against the hijack range? Is it indeed 36%? If it is, I'm a genius. Might be lower actually, maybe like 34. Let me know in the comments. I'll be watching. I'll be curious. So go for big check raise here. We want to raise sometimes, we want to call sometimes. Doesn't really matter what we do here. Of course, there are exploits available on certain board textures, but I don't think this is one that gets like massively overfolded. There's a lot of naturally good hands to defend here for hijack. So yeah, I'm not sure this is a board where I'm like over the moon about check raising, like I would be in some late position skirmish on 8-5 deuce rainbow. Check that out in episode 1 of Cash Injection, by the way. We talk about that exploit there, about why you should just raise people on 8-5 deuce rainbow when they bet small. You should just raise them, like almost always, unless you have nothing. Ace on the turn. We go for a check here. I think we need to be a bit careful here. Like, we can obviously bet again with Queen 10. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is such a horrendous spot for us on the turn. Like, our flop raise has been called. The board is paired. Villain is the one with, like, the boats here for the most part. And the ace is just missing, like, 100% of our bluffing range. So we're clearly not doing well here. It's also cutting back on the combos of value we can have when we raise, like, ace 9, ace jack on the flop, ace queen. These are our value hands. So this is kind of grim. I think we do have to mix in a good bit of check here if we want to play a reasonable strategy. I also suspected this spot might be underfolded if I did bet the turn, so I decided to check for those reasons this time. We do get there on the river, but like, what are we trying to get paid by now? Like ace 5, ace 6, ace 4, ace 3, ace deuce, ace 7, ace 8, ace 10, ace queen. We block some of that. Like what, king jack that gets curious and wants to bluff catch that didn't fold flop. I don't know, man. This feels like a spot we can't actually go that big because we are losing to ace king. We are losing to like king's full. We're losing to ace jack that check back the turn. Like some slow plays like this, we're chopping with queen 10. So like whatever our sizing is here, I don't think it can be like a gigantic one. So I just opted to go for the relatively big bet here. Now, this is the thing about this spot. You've got to be really conscious of the pool you're playing in. And by the way, I think blocking this river would be fine with queen 10 here. I don't think it would be too bad on this card. Villain snap jammed. Like absolutely snap jammed. Now, this line is suspicious in a vacuum. Like if you don't think about the player pool and its average skill level, and if you don't think about the timing of this play, this line is really suspicious. Because it's like, you didn't bet the turn with ace king, or you've called the flop with pocket kings, which is like, okay, maybe, but it seems a little bit of a stretch. Meanwhile, there's so many combos of like king jack, king queen, king 10 that you can just turn into a bluff here because they look like the bluffs. But there's two problems. I really want to call here if I'm against a good reg. Like if I think you're good at poker, I'm calling you here because I don't believe you. However, this is GG 100 Russian cash. This pool is a very low standard for these stakes. Like this pool is, it feels like you're playing against 3-year-old children. Like I typed a message to my friend the other day and I said, man, grinding this sample in this pool, because that's what I'm doing, this is my whole challenge, I want to show that this can be pulverized, not just beaten, but pulverized. It feels like I'm fighting a 2.5-year-old girl. That's literally what I said. And he was like, yeah. Because people in this pool, for the most part, aren't at the skill level at these stakes where they're finding the jam with king queen here. And if they are finding the jam with king queen here, they're very unlikely to do it that quickly. Like this is very, very fast. Like if we watch this back again, guys, this is extremely fast. Just watch this hand again. Let's just like soak in the flavor of what's going on here. I know this isn't the topic of the video, but it's kind of interesting. So we check the turn, they check back, the king of clubs comes in the river, we have a think, half pot's probably good here, 2/3 is probably fine, block's probably okay. I'm sort of leaning towards the bigger bet here. I think most of the range is just ace-x. Boom, 1, 2, 3, boom. 3 seconds. Again, what we have here is a situation where villain is either just, you know, showing up with the nuts, like ace-king, exactly, or ace-jack, or quad aces that they slow play turn. Of course you slow play turn with quad aces. That's what people love to do, even though I would bet. Or they're psychopath. They're an absolute psychopath. Like the king comes, they see king queen, they're like, good blockers, boom. Like without even thinking about it, they're just like, I block full houses and I block. They actually don't block full houses with the king here, but they block straights. And they're just going for it. Or they have like pocket queens and they think they want to block queen 10. I don't think they should want to block queen 10 because that's a bet fold. In this spot, they should actually want to block like a jack, because my main value here is like pocket jacks that, or ace jack that I'm going to call off, or 9, same thing, pocket 9s or ace 9. So either they're a sicko that has like 10-9 and they're like, this is the hand I jam, or they're using like real-time assistance, or they're a bot, or they're a psychopath, or they just have the nuts. And I thought the latter was like 5-1 more likely than the former with this timing. Had villain tanked and then jammed, I think I would have had much more of a decision. Like I'd have had a real decision on my hands here, because like I'd probably still fold for the simple fact that it's GG. But if this was a higher stakes game and I knew my opponent was good, make no mistake, guys, this is a spot I'm very suspicious in. It's easy to overbluff once you know how here, and you can really overcook it once you start doing it. You guys like to see me make monster hands, right? Even when the hand's boring, you just want to see it because you're gluttons for that kind of thing. This guy 3-bet me, had 5s. I was like, I'm not folding to you with 5s. 5s is a great hand. Shut up. Flopped quads. Checked quickly to disguise the strength of the quads. Check raise. If you don't check raise here, guys, like, okay, you don't have to check raise here. You can check call. The thing is that this is a really tight looking player. Like this guy was being extremely passive. I don't know who you are, Vesper, but you struck me as a super passive player. You once did something that made me give you the dark green tag. The dark green tag is like, this guy's like your grandfather. Like he's sitting there waiting for a hand and he's like, oh, these kids these days and they're bluffing. Like that's the kind of guy this is. Because of that, I just check raised because I didn't want him like slowing down later and just like not putting money into the pot and stuff like that. So I went for the check raise. You can of course slow play here in theory, and against the right opponent, slow play is probably way better, i.e. someone aggressive, but I just didn't think this was an aggressive player. I could be wrong, by the way. Maybe you're watching this and maybe you're going to correct me, but I've given you the dark green tag, so I don't trust you to bluff. I'm not having it. I don't want you shutting down on a 7 turn with queens, and then the river coming in 9 and me making nothing. So I thought I would just check raise you right now. So that's how that one went. They folded, of course, probably folded jacks, and you know, we made no money. Okay, another hand that I lost. Another hand that didn't work, just to balance the books a little bit more here. We have Jack 10 in the big blind. This is the last one, guys, and then we're out of here. Don't forget to check out Carrot Corner after this. Black Friday sales running for a few days. 25% off, grab it while it lasts. Jack 10 off here. Yeah, 3x, probably a weaker player. Gonna peel this, don't give a shit what range charts say about how to play against 3x. I'm pretty confident call is just the best play. Big C bet, again, consistent with weaker player. Not because it's bad to do that here, it's not. But most regs bet 1/3. It's just a population thing. It's a demographic thing. It skews the possibilities of villain being a weaker player significantly. So on the river, we arrive with a range that contains a load of queen X. Has a lot of like queen jack, queen 10, ace queen, etc. Pocket 10s, pocket jacks, stuff like this. Maybe 10s and jacks are a bit too good. They 3-bet pre, but you get the point. There's like the queen X hands in there. And queen X is going to block this river for value. That's how it's going to play. So when I have queen jack here or ace queen here, I'm probably going to block bet. Ace queen you could maybe even half pot, but I'm going to probably block. What that means is that I want to be playing some block bet as a bluff as well, just in principle. But in reality, I think villain's range here is going to be lots of underpair, lots of ace high, lots of just nothing. And so I figured like block's just going to perform really nicely in this spot. It's going to be a really cool sizing because the thing is, there's a lot of inelasticity here. So if you imagine that you have an elastic band, right, and I increase the sizing by stretching it, the band stretches, the amount of combos that villain folds stretches out. That's an elastic range. Villain is reacting to your sizing in a proportionate way. That's what we call sort of optimal elasticity. Like the solver, for example, when you increase your bet size exponentially against the solver, it folds exponentially more often. When you do that against the fish, in some spots, the fish is going to be overly elastic. Like the elastic band is going to really stretch and like the range is going to change dramatically based on your bet size. And in other spots, it's like you're snapping a pencil instead of pulling an elastic band. It's like you literally have this range that just doesn't budge and then it breaks suddenly. So here, when you have a hand like ace queen and you bet half pot, that probably does fine. If you have king jack, you probably want to bet really big because they're unlikely to fold a queen, but they're very likely to fold under pairs and ace high. There's just a really big difference here between a pair on the board of queens and kings and then the other hands. The villain can have like pocket 5s or ace 4 or something like that, or ace 10 or ace jack. So in this situation, what that means is that we probably want to value bet really big when we have a king and bluff small when we have a hand like jack 10. So this is a block bet that's fine in theory because we do have some queen X that does this, but in practice it's also fine. It needs to work 25% of the time to break even. We know when villain has a hand like queen 10, they're just going to be snapping practically any sizing. Maybe not like an overbet, but that's another story. So instead of betting like 70% pot here with the jack 10, I figured it's probably better just to bet smaller because so many of the hands that fold to like a B70 here are also folding to a B33. And it needs way less fold equity to be good. So poker is about risk and reward. Block betting the river is also about risk and reward. We do accept that it won't work as often when we do this, but we don't need it to. And that's why a play like this can still be good. Well, that's the end of the video. What are you waiting for? Off you go. Off you pop along to carrotcorner.com. Get your 25% off. Don't say I'm not good to you. I'll see you back here for another video very soon. Have fun block betting.